Hey guys, just a quick note at the top of this thing that our giveaway is still ongoing until July 8th. The prizes are a Steven Universe first edition art book, as well as some Gravity Falls paper crafts. If you're interested in that, please go ahead and leave us a rating and review on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, whatever your podcatcher choice is. Screenshot it and tag Tracy and I, and you'll be entered for the drawing. That's ongoing till July 8th. We'll announce winners July 10th. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Hello, welcome to another episode of Not Joanna Eggs. I'm Robbie.
And I'm Tracy.
And this week we are talking about a really strange but interesting film, A Scanner Darkly 2006, from Richard Linklater.
Yeah, to call this a heady film is not really doing it justice, because this is also from one of Philip K. Dick's novels, who, in case you're not aware, is probably behind some of your favorite sci-fi movies without realizing it.
Minority Report, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which became Blade Runner.
Also, fucking hell, what was it? Oh god, I'm sorry. I just blanked it. Total Recall. That's ironic. I had trouble recalling that.
Oh, he did Total Recall too? Jesus.
Yeah, he did Total Recall. He did. It's like pretty much every major film that's not affiliated with the Aliens franchise, he's pretty much been involved with.
Yeah, he's one of the big sort of like hard sci-fi authors. So before we're going to give you a brief summary, but part and parcel of this movie is sort of like this big twist near the end, and so we are obviously going to spoil that. So I want to warn you about that up front, but I will also steal this line from April Wolf, which is that it's not what happens, but how it happens.
Exactly.
As much as knowing what's coming can spoil the surprise, I think watching it unfold is ultimately more interesting.
And also, we can't not talk about it because it's so integral to the rest of the plot. It comes across as being very satisfying, but unfortunately we do have to talk about it. But also, this movie came out 13 years ago, so, and it's also available on Amazon Prime for free right now, to my knowledge, for the charge of Amazon Prime, whatever it is. Anyway, yeah, do you want to get into a brief synopsis, Robbie?
Yeah, so the very brief synopsis is that, well, I have to start with this bit, which is amusing to me. The setup is that America has lost the war on drugs. The drug on war. The drug on war.
It's a drug on war. I love that Wilco song.
No, so it's lost the war on drugs, which is the premise, and what that has created is this sort of like super intense police state. Those who work undercover for police trying to sort of ferret out drug dealers and things like this have to be so essentially deep undercover that it should be that you don't even know who your colleagues really are.
Yeah, it's kind of like that whole, when they use that voice distortion thing whenever there are calls or interviews with people on, like, say, TV, where they're trying to keep their anonymity there. There's this weird thing called the scramble suit that the agents within the movie have to wear, like these two undercover agents that work off of each other. It's like so cool too, because we should note that within this movie the animation style is rotoscoped. So what happened was they shot this on film. They did all the shooting for the movie within 23 days, but the post-production was a year and a half because animation. And that's honestly, even getting that amount of work done within a year and a half is pretty stellar.
It's nutty.
It's so trippy too, because like they make such a good use of the medium that for a subject matter like this, I couldn't really imagine it staying as live action as it was.
Oh god, no. I think it would have weakened so much of what it's trying to do.
And then it will looked a lot hokier too, because even though this came out in 2006, like it still looks great now.
Oh, it looks beautiful. So the scramble suit like basically scrambles what you look like through like millions of images of people.
Thousands of amalgamations constantly fluctuating at the same time, so that it's completely ambiguous as to who you are.
Right. And a fun sort of Easter egg to that is that if you're really, really carefully watching,
I don't know how you would catch this one without seeing it like 5 times, but
I mean, probably more than that. You'd probably have to be watching it in slow-mo or something, but
just like doing like the step-by-step thing.
Yeah, the frame-by-frame or whatever. One of the faces that we see on his scramble suit at the beginning is Philip K. Dick, which is kind of like fun. So basically the movie is about Keanu Reeves' character, Bob Arctor, who is an undercover drug agent for, the San Francisco Police Department? I don't remember.
I think it's Anaheim, California. roughly.
Yeah, I just remember it being in California.
Yeah, I think it's at the very beginning it says like Anaheim, California, 7 years in the future. But that was like of when that movie came out, so it would have been 2013. But I kind of like to think that it's 7 years from whenever you're watching it, because drug epidemics happen all the time in America. Because America's a weird place to be.
Well, and that's the joke that I think is like it's not a joke, but it kind of is. The idea that America has lost the war on drugs. We did. We've already lost it. It is over.
We never really had a fighting chance to begin with. Like, I don't know if you saw this in the news the other day, but in a port in Philadelphia, they detained this gigantic container full of, I think it was cocaine or meth, one or the other. It was $1 billion worth of product within that container.
Oh my fucking God.
It was like the biggest bust, and they found it at the port of Philadelphia. I was like, what the fuck? Like, they're not even trying to be subtle anymore. I was like, this is a metaphor for like everything's a metaphor. You are a metaphor.
Everything's a metaphor. There's nothing is anything. Everything is something else.
It's just mind numbing, where it's like, because I would say that the two of us, we're both relatively straight edge people, but like it's just the availability of drugs within America specifically is just astronomical to me. Like, it blows my mind.
It's unbelievable. The fact that the premise, even back when Philip K. Dick wrote it, was that begins with America having lost the war on drugs is hilarious, because even by then we had lost the war on drugs.
I mean, he may as well, and granted, he wrote this book in, I think, 1977 or 82. It was one or the other. I forget. No, he passed away in 80.
Early 70s.
He passed away in 82. That's right. And I think he wrote this in 1977. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I mean, he may as well have prophesized the crack epidemic or the amphetamines epidemic or any number of meth epidemics now.
Yeah, it's all this nonsense.
I wish he knew how right he was at the time.
Yeah, right.
But he was just very depressed and was not having a good time.
Honestly, I think he did in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But that's sort of a whole different discussion.
True.
So he's an undercover agent, and he is trying to ferret out the supplier of his girlfriend, played by Winona Ryder, who sells drugs, in specific a particularly dangerous drug called
Substance D.
Substance D, that's right.
I think it makes you hallucinate, basically.
Yeah, it's like a really intense drug that like really fucks with your mind.
Like mushrooms times 20 or something.
Yeah, well, it like rewires your brain over time is the way that it...
Yeah, that was like the scariest part, is that like they get into explaining the long-term effects of using Substance D, is that eventually it separates the hemispheres in your brain. So you kind of stop remembering who you are and you lose your sense of self, and then you basically become a vegetable. Like, it's awful.
Yeah, and so it's super interesting in a number of ways, because I think that like even from scene one we're seeing sort of the complexity and difficulty of identity in this movie is important, right? Mm-hmm. Because when we first see the character, he's in the scramble suit, so he's not even himself on a basic level, right?
Yeah. And anytime that they change out of the scramble suit, they do it by themselves in like an enclosed room, no cameras. Mm-hmm. And they are asked to leave, or like they leave the office in like a separate tunnel thing. They keep them separate from everyone
from a
else.
Different door, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of this movie, I would say, like, a good chunk of the middle of it is more or less drug-fueled misadventures.
Oh, yeah. That's basically Robert Downey Jr.'s character and Woody Harrelson's character together.
But what it's meant to do is push Keanu Reeves' character deeper into drug use and turn him into a junkie so that he can be pushed into a rehab program. He doesn't know this, of course.
Yeah, he finds this out way too late.
Well, he doesn't even really find it out, right?
Well, it's so subtle that he doesn't realize it until after he's actually sent to the rehab center.
Yeah, so he goes to... They basically turn him into a junkie to put him in this rehab center to bust it up, because they feel like the suspicion is, and it's all but confirmed in the dialogue in the movie, is that they sponsor rehabilitation for users of Substance D. But they are actually the ones producing it, right? So it's this huge sort of conspiracy, which again, this is like, it's the through line that's mentioned a few times throughout the movie, and it seems to sort of fall by the wayside until like the last, 10 minutes?
The amount of info that they dump onto you within like the last 10, 15 minutes or so is like, it's such a bummer and it's very smart. Like, I think that the actual twist that they have going on with it was like, oh, that makes complete sense because they can create, like, they now have an entire workforce to keep Substance D going throughout the city and addicting more people and making them more money.
It's slave labor too, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's like they're basically poisoning them by giving them these psychotropic drugs, and then eventually they become so brain dead that they're being used as cattle to help like harvest all these plants.
Right,
like,
exactly.
It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah, and so that's the big turn that's super interesting. And so along the way, what happens is they start monitoring Keanu Reeves' character as a cop is called Fred, and he is put in charge of monitoring himself as a person, Bob Arctor.
Yeah, it's very, very weird. And there's a senior officer that's giving him directions named Hank.
Right.
That also has a scramble suit on. That like basically they're having a back and forth and everything. And Hank is also kind of distrustful towards Bob to an extent, like asking a few too many questions, like things that might get too personal, to the point that Bob starts to doubt himself and gets more paranoid.
Right. Well, and that's, it's super interesting the way it all sort of like tumbles out. So in the process of them monitoring him, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, whose name I forget.
Barris,
that's right.
Yeah.
Basically rats on Bob Arctor and says he's like super involved with like some big name cartel or something. And then they arrest him at the end of it, which is so funny because it's just like...
Oh, it's great.
like, it's this weird, nutty, like, triple cross. So they're like, all right, well, Rob...
RDJ.
Well, that's not what I was going to say, but...
No, I know.
So it goes like this, right? Barris rats on Arctor as being a drug dealer, like a big-time drug dealer.
Yeah.
So they start monitoring Arctor because they think he's a drug dealer. And then they arrest Barris, and Hank claims that he was the real target because they were basically monitoring Arctor to watch Barris, who they were actually after, when in reality, the whole thing was just turning Fred/Bob Arctor into a junkie to be their mole, their sort of half-witting mole in New Path.
This movie's like playing Chutes and Ladders. Like, it's just new stuff keeps happening. It's like when you think it's going one way, it takes you another way. But that's like the most interesting part of it, because obviously the people that were working on this, like at the very least, Robert Downey Jr. and Woody Harrelson. I mean, I think everyone, it really seemed like they had a great time working on this. Because Robert Downey Jr. gets to be like his most manic, kind of fucked up mental self that he has.
So there's a few things there I want to point out, which I think are fun. Like, first of all, Robert Downey Jr. apparently didn't memorize his lines totally and had them.
How could he? His character talks so fast. It'd be impossible to remember it.
He's a mushroom/acid-addled conspiracy theorist.
And also, Robert Downey Jr. was formerly an addict back in the day too.
Yes.
Like back during like the first heyday of him, like between Less Than Zero and Heart and Souls, he had some issues. So he might have been channeling some of that, same energy he's got going on. He's kind of always been sort of manic about his energy, too. Like, he brings it into Iron Man also.
Oh, yeah. He kept, like, sticky notes of his lines around the set.
Everywhere.
It's just Post-its everywhere. And so when they were animating it, they just had to, like, color over them, basically.
Yeah, like, that's it. It's like, that's the best part of rotoscoping, is that they could just take all that stuff out.
But
great.
The other thing, so Robert Downey Jr. got interested once they got Keanu Reeves on, and then what ultimately drove him and Winona Ryder and Woody Harrelson to be a part of the movie was that it was the strangest script they had ever seen. Like, all three of them said that. Which, not shocking, but like, holy shit, I love that that's it.
When it comes to sci-fi movies, this has got to be kind of a hard sell, because number one, it's a sci-fi film, it's not action-based, it's predominantly dialogue-based. It's very heady and like, psychedelic, obviously. It's a very specific novel, too, in that, like, the history behind this is what really interests me, is because Philip K. Dick, at the time that he wrote this, had just gotten out of his fourth marriage, or basically his wife left him at that time, which I believe this would have been, I think, roughly 1972, 73, something like that. And basically, the whole house that they have, the whole house that Bob Arctor is living in, and the calling back, like, he has this one vision of seeing his, like, former wife and his two daughters that were in the house. That was basically just his life, because after Philip K. Dick's wife left him, he basically just had a bunch of these junkies come in to live with him just because he needed some companionship near him. And he ended up getting, like, very hopped up on drugs at that point. And is really, really sad, because obviously he needed some kind of community and companionship, but It just, God, like, his entire life is tragic. Do yourself a solid and look it up later if you're intrigued, because he's made some amazing books, but my God, his life was really, really sad. And I want to look more into it.
Sure. Well, and I think that's one of the things this movie does so well, right? Because it's based on his actual experiences being essentially Bob Arctor, right? Like, that is pretty much his story, with the caveat that Bob Arctor is a detective who gets turned into a junkie, whereas Philip K. Dick is a junkie and, like, sort of turns his house into this thing.
Yeah, and he would try to redirect his, like, negative thought patterns and everything through writing, but he still went through huge periods of writer's block, too. I think it was, like, immediately after that book came out.
Yeah, it's not, you can't just, like, do it, but, you know.
No, I know.
So, one thing we haven't talked about, who I thought was interesting, and I think, like, is a perfect way to start the movie, is the character of Charles Freck.
Oh my God.
He's so, like, he's such a good example of going too deep down the rabbit hole can look like.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, talk about perfect casting, because this is the same guy that was in Empire Records, Rory Cochrane. He was the character Lucas, who is arguably, like, the worst character in that movie, just because he's such a sociopath, like, betting a bunch of money in Atlantic City to try to buy out, like, this Tower Records-esque company from buying their hometown record store, and he lost all of it and he didn't get fired. I was like, what the fuck? I've got conflicted feelings about that movie, sorry.
No, you're fine. I have no opinions on it, but I think that guy's also interesting because, like, Richard Linklater has dragged him from Dazed and Confused as well into this movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Where he was also addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
I think he's just got one of those faces.
I guess. I mean, it definitely, the way he holds his lip in the movie, like, reads that way.
Yeah, he's got, like, this weird, like, kind of, I don't know, like, half lip thing going on.
It almost looks like lopsided, right? Like his... Yeah. It's weird.
Like, he's got, like, a weird overbite or something, and him hallucinating seeing aphids or bugs crawling all over him.
So that's the thing, right? Like, I think that scene alone, that opening scene alone, justifies the animation, because I don't think there's any way you could do that scene live action without it looking like kind of hokey or like aging poorly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also the fact that, like, I don't know what it was. It's just like something about, like, seeing him douse himself with, like, bug spray, which is probably corrosive or, like, bad for his skin and everything.
It's so
and
bad
then doing that to his dog. But, like,
that poor dog.
No, yeah, and also it just emphasizes, like, how bad the effects of Substance D are, because we don't know quite to the extent of his use, but we know that, or at least it seems like, would you say that Robert Downey Jr.'s character ends up using it, or some of the rest of them? Because it's kind of ambiguous.
Using
like RDJ
what?
Using Substance D, because it comes
they all
off
do.
To me. But for some reason, RDJ must not use that much of it, because he has the best composure out of them. It would be RDJ has the least, then Charles Freck, then Woody Harrelson, maybe.
I mean, Woody Harrelson is just sort of like a very Woody Harrelson-esque character in this.
Yeah, and he's wearing a ridiculous wig too. This is
like,
just after he started shaving his head, like really committing to it.
Can we talk? I'm sorry. This is the absolute most tangent, but I have to say something about it.
Robbie, this is on brand for us. They're used to it.
I know. At the end of Venom, we see.
Yes. Yeah,
Woody Harrelson in. It's like, if you cut out the first half hour, it's perfect. It's so good.
You cut out the first 45 minutes exactly. It's perfect.
Oh, is it 45 minutes?
That's what Kent and I did. So, like, basically, like, you get some of Jenny Slate in the beginning, who's obviously, it's a delight to see her.
Yeah.
Like, if you cut out the first 30 to 40-ish minutes, it's a perfect movie.
Yeah,
it's just
great.
that for the exposition part sucks balls, and it's really boring, and you don't need it. You learn everything you need to know after that time.
Yeah, then you get goofy things like, do it, jump.
And also, he wants chocolate and tater tots. I'm like, yes, sign me up. Thank you, Tom Hardy.
There's so many good comics I've seen on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Of him as Venom. My favorite one is he's walking around, and he's like, Eddie, we want McDonald's. We have food at home. No! And he, like, grabs the door. You see the Venom suit grab the door to McDonald's, dragging Eddie into it. It's so good.
That's adorable.
I love it. But anywho, my problem is the very end of that movie, we see Woody Harrelson in a horrifically red wig.
Oh,
and
God.
it is the most disconcerting thing I've ever seen.
He just looks like Ronald McDonald if they didn't put makeup on him. Like, it's bad.
Which is not good. it's real bad. I don't like Ronald McDonald to begin with.
No.
Leaving him in prison without a shower and makeup, bad call.
But honestly, if they kept going with that, people would have just assumed, like, wait, is he the new Joker? And it's like, no, he's not. Joaquin Phoenix is. How dare you?
How dare you?
How dare you?
So, but Charles Freck was interesting to me in a number of ways, but I
honestly loved his character.
He was, he's one of those characters that's kind of hard because, like,
he's a sad
I like
sack.
him because he's a sad sack, and it's fun to watch him, but also, like, it's very sad because of what he is. I think the best one, though, and this is kind of an interesting trivia thing, is he tries to kill himself, right?
Yeah.
Which is
obviously not good. Obviously not a good thing. We don't condone suicide in case that, if we had to state that.
Wasn't clear.
In case it wasn't emphatically clear, we don't condone suicide.
Yes. But the way that scene plays out is one of my favorite things in the world.
Oh, God.
Because he tries to kill himself, instead hallucinates that a man is standing there reading him everything wrong he's ever done.
It's like for the rest of eternity, he's going to read off every sin and every terrible thing he's ever done. It's like this gross, like, it's got this gigantic, like, alien with, like, 1,000 eyes or something. Yeah. It's just staring, looking at him reading out this gigantic tome. Like, it may as well have been an old atlas or something from a library. And it's like, he's just like, oh, this is going to take a while, isn't it? I've done some bad things.
So here's the trivia part that's fun. In 1976, Philip K. Dick recorded himself reading that passage of the book.
It was for BBC Radio, wasn't it? Something like that?
KPFK-FM.
Okay.
A California station.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
And they wanted to use that in the movie so bad, but it was just so shitty they couldn't justify it.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
If audio's that far gone, there's only so much restorative work that you can do on it.
Yeah.
So it's not shocking, but it still would have been a really nice Easter egg if they could have thrown it in.
What I particularly enjoy about that is that's a joke I make constantly to my roommate, is that when he's done something wrong, then he has to hear his litany of sins. And it's
how many times have you done that to him?
I don't do it. It's his girlfriend, and so, like, she never forgets anything, and so sometimes, like, she'll just start yelling at him about things he's done, like, 3 years ago, and it's like, Andrew, don't you remember on November 3rd, 2017, you said the word bitch? Like,
does that diffuse the tension, or does he get defensive?
I mean, he doesn't really react. He just kind of has to sit there and take it.
She just says she's just like telling it how it is, and she's like, hey, remember that one time you said bitch?
So here's the thing. Like, one, it's very often her, like, screaming at him. Two, I leave the room because I don't have time for that shit.
No, and also it doesn't directly involve you either.
Also,
so
not my monkeys, not my circus.
Yeah. What a great turn of phrase.
Yes,
but yeah, no,
yes.
I'm very much the same, where I'm just like, I like, pretty much anytime that I hear any kind of, like, weird, like, confrontation or argument or something, I'm just basically that gif of Grandpa Simpson going into the bordello, dropping his hat off, and then turning in a circle,
around,
grabbing his hat, and then leaving. That's pretty
Yep.
much me.
I try to be Homer Simpson slowly melting into the bushes.
Oh, God.
So, on the note of, I should have said this earlier, the note of this being the strangest script, Winona Ryder says this was the most difficult story and script she'd ever worked on.
Yeah, and she was on, she was in a number of Tim Burton movies back in the day, too, but, like, most of his movies are played relatively straight.
Yeah,
Tim like,
Burton,
they're just, like, it's the weird flourishes about, like, the design and the character interactions mostly, but most of the stories are pretty straightforward.
Yeah, Tim Burton dreams of his movies being this weird.
Yeah,
honestly.
fucking A, right?
The other thing that I read, which was interesting, is one of the reasons that they went with the rotoscoping was to make it feel like a moving graphic novel.
Yeah. And then they made a graphic novel using stills from the movie, too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at the library not too far from you. But
nice.
Yeah, there was one other actually, I wanted to mention this really quick because I guess that I think that there are some people out there that really don't like rotoscoping, like they don't consider it animation, but within this movie, like there's over like 7 million different drawings. You know, like it's animation. You know, like it's kind of like what people. I guess that there's some kind of sector of the internet that shames people for using reference, but I'm like, no, dude, fuck you.
There is
like
actually
everything
not.
is based off of reference. Like,
Yeah,
it seems like there are some people online that are just like, oh, like trying to shame others for using references. I'm like, yeah. People that learn and want to get better at their art do that. Tough titties, get over it.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't have looking back at my notes of the movie itself, I don't have a ton.
The one thing that really made me sad was obviously the ending, but there was one thing that blew my mind, and I did not realize this. I sent this to Robbie in all caps in the DM because it blew my mind, is that, and apparently, I don't, and granted, this movie came out 13 years ago as of when we're recording this, right?
Yes.
And for some reason, Alex Jones of InfoWars fame is in this as a protester, as like basically this street prophet guy that's just like yelling stuff. And the problem is that his character is right. All the things he's saying about the conspiracy theory starting the drugs are right. And I am not okay with saying Alex Jones is right.
Yes. So here's a tidbit. Apparently, and I need to like look into this, but the previous movie that Richard Linklater had done at the time was called The Waking Hours, I think, which was similarly animated / rotoscoped, but also had Alex Jones in it. I'm sorry, it's Waking Life is the movie.
I also wanted to get the name of the animation company that had produced it because
do it.
let me see if I can find it here. I honestly I kind of want to look at the Waking Life too, but I'm mostly just kind of incredulous at that fucking Alex Jones is in these.
I know,
because
it's just...
granted, okay, 13 years ago, he was nothing like what he is now. I mean, like, he was definitely still kind of, like, aggrandizing, but he didn't quite have the audience that he has, the specific audience that he has now.
Well, you know what's nutty, right? Josh was talking about this. I guess back in the day, like, pre-Obama, he was a big supporter of Obama, and then suddenly... Now he's this. Like...
There must have been some... Also, his headshot on Wikipedia is terrifying.
I'm sure it is. It's Alex Jones.
I mean, like, I don't know what it is. It's just, like, I think that there's just, like, with people like Alex Jones, it's like he reached a certain point where he just got so disillusioned and disenfranchised, like, supporting... Anyway, but anyhow, it's just like it's very striking to me because like he's kind of always been sort of a kook, but it was just kind of he was in the movie he was just kind of charming, like he had this kind of air about him and everything where like and then he just gets tased and taken off to a van or like by the government where they're just like, well, we got to cover this up. And then later, very coincidentally, Donna pulls up and picks up Keanu Reeves, or it's like almost as though she knew he was going to be by there. Oh God, man. Yeah, so the animation company that worked on this, or the software that was used for it, was called Rotoscoped, which is developed by an animator named Bob Sebastian. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
It's called interpolated rotoscoping, which I believe is just used like it's not quite like a filter, but it allows them to make animation using techniques similar to hand drawn. But it doesn't like cut out a lot of like the nuances and stuff that you'd see in like see something like Ralph Bakshi where it's obviously still rotoscoping, but there are some certain like like say like someone has a weird twitch of the eye or like their mouth flutters in like a weird way or something. You can't quite get that if you're like with some older kinds of rotoscoping, but within this you can.
Okay.
As far as I know, it was only used on those two main films. It might have been used on something else.
And actually, this was, I thought, super interesting and also sad. At least as of 2006, and this might still be the case, it was both the highest budget and highest grossing rotoscope movie.
Yeah.
Why that's sad, the budget was $8.7 million, the box office was $7.7 million. So despite great box office, it couldn't beat its own production value.
And it's one thing, because as far as I know, I think it's got kind of like a mild cult status thing, but nothing quite to like what we're used to. It's not like The Room. It's not like, honestly, even a Goofy movie. And that's really kind of a shame because I think that overall the storytelling is like, granted, I had to rewind a couple of times because I was a little distracted when I was watching this. This is another thing where you really can't be doing anything else. You kind of just have to watch it and just enjoy it. And we're not just reviewing this right now because Keanu Reeves is in it.
Yes, we are.
Okay, yeah, we are. But
I regret nothing.
I mean, like, honestly, within the past 2 weeks, I've watched a Keanu Reeves movie, like, pretty much every other night, if not more.
That's a lot of Keanu Reeves, man.
It was good. And also,
I'm not saying...
I'd also never seen The Matrix before, so I was watching that.
What?
I'd never seen The Matrix. I mean, also, I was, number one, I was pretty young at the time that it came out. I would have been 10, probably.
I definitely saw that movie when it came out.
No, okay, I definitely didn't. Mostly because I thought the whole idea of having, like, people plugged into stuff creeped me out, because I don't like gore, I don't like body horror, I don't like that kind of stuff. So in that regard, it didn't appeal to me. And also, it's just like, I kind of prefer like more the sort of psychological stuff, like all the weird like tech stuff that they had going on with like, oh, he's inside the Matrix now, like he's learning kung fu, all this stuff, or he's fighting Agent Smith, whatever. I don't know. It didn't really intrigue me. I felt like it was a little too stylish for, you know, like over substance.
It might be a little style over substance. But
honestly, that's kind of Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner 2 to me. Because like I think that like a lot of what Blade Runner had established was more about like aesthetics as opposed to the storytelling itself. Like, and that was a notoriously kind of troubled film production too, among other things. But I think a lot of it was just because of studio interference, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's like most people know Blade Runner for like a lot of the aesthetics that they developed, as opposed to the story, which is kind of at least in the movie.
Actually, it was kind of funny because I was reading a thread on Twitter earlier about Cyberpunk and how like what a lot of people want to do with Cyberpunk is sort of like slavishly try to reproduce something like Blade Runner.
Yeah, and it's like the reason that Blade Runner existed is like it's kind of like with the xenomorphs in Alien, wherein everyone just kind of assumes that like, oh, we have to make our aliens look like that. Like there's not really a whole lot of fluctuation with alien design as much in a lot of major blockbuster films at this point. Yeah. Which is kind of depressing because that's kind of the fun of sci-fi is that you can kind of create whatever you want.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things. Well, that's, you know, when we talked about some of these other sci-fi flicks, that's what I've enjoyed about, like, you know, as much as we shit on it, Redline. There were tons of thousands of different aliens.
My Vietnam has come back to haunt me.
I was listening to one of our older episodes.
Oh, God.
today, and it came up, and I was like, well, okay.
Yeah,
we'll never escape it, Tracy.
As much as I hate on Redline, it was not nearly as boring as The Napping Princess was, and I will take that to my grave. Because that movie sucks balls, and I never want to watch it again.
That's the episode I was listening to. That's so fucking funny.
Yeah, honestly, I think that this is definitely one of those sort of sleeper hits that it really should be more popular than it is.
Oh, yeah.
Because maybe it might be kind of disorienting to you, especially if you get motion sick, to watch the rotoscoping thing, because I honestly didn't mind it, but I'm used to seeing a lot of rotoscope movies. You know, like we've watched like a ton of Ralph Bakshi movies.
I mean, yeah, we also watched just like a ton of animated stuff, so it's not...
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like honestly, if you go back to like Betty Boop and Popeye, like that's all rotoscope too, or at least a lot of it is, especially for anything that features
even,
like
Sleeping Beauty has rotoscoping in it when they're dancing.
Yeah, the Sleeping Beauty does, 101 Dalmatians does, the Jungle Book does, like basically anything that came out. It's
all over the place.
Yeah, like anything that came out in I think the Silver era for Disney, like a lot of the human live action reference, that was all filmed. So it was technically kind of rotoscoped for at least a lot of the major like keyframes, like when they're actually posing for them. And also like one of my favorite music videos of all time, Baby I'm Yours by Breakbot, is also rotoscoped, and it's all done using watercolors. It's really, really pretty. It's like this very fun dancey song, and it's all rotoscoped, and I thought that was really dope. They do incorporate some experimental animation in there as well. Sure. Because, you know, obviously it's the medium, you know, why wouldn't you try to use that to make anything fun that you want?
Absolutely. So Scanner Darkly, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's
pretty readily accessible from what I can tell. You can rent it realistically anywhere.
I won't deny that I think the pacing is super weird in the middle of this thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, also you're following the experiences of Bob Arctor becoming an addict, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of things happen, and even within that there are some really just like amazing shots. So like I just want to call this one out real quick because it
Go for it.
knocked me out of the water when I was watching. He comes in to do these sort of like drug screening things, right? Mm-hmm. And so at one point when he's doing it, they're talking about how it affects the left brain and the right brain. And the shot is framed from behind him so that he's dividing the two psychiatrists he's talking to, one on the right and one on the left.
Yeah, which is totally deliberate because their way of delivering information is entirely separate from each other, almost as though they're manifestations of each of those sides of the brain.
Right, exactly. And that's just such, like, it's not subtle, but it's also, like, so well done. And it's not the kind of thing that I think is done enough.
And they keep coming back, too, because they are the ones that keep checking in on his mental state throughout the movie.
Well, and it only switches to that when they're talking about the two brains, right? And so it's like... So parts are missing in the left side, the one says, and the other says, so the right will try and compensate, the other one says, right? And it's like, it's super well done. It's really interesting.
If it was in a different movie, they might have played it for more of like a comedic note, but you're basically watching this guy's brain degenerate because of drug abuse. So it's like, and anytime that you are seeing interactions between characters, whenever they're talking very erratically or over each other or anything, you have to keep reminding yourself like, oh, they're drug addicts. So that's just kind of, that's how they, operate.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's, like, a good example of that is early in the movie he has the drug test, and like, hey, if you keep your sense of humor, you'll probably be fine. It didn't really hit me until he gets to the second interview with them that you can kind of watch his sense of humor, his personality ebb away throughout the movie.
Yep, systematically he starts losing it, like, the more that he starts interacting with either Hank within the, government police department, whoever it is that's sponsoring this whole project with New Path. It's just heartbreaking because, like, by the end of it, you're like, he kind of is like a shell of his former self, but the ending's a little ambiguous in that, like, wait, is he putting on a front? Because I wasn't entirely sure whether or not that was supposed to be what was implied or if he was actually like brain dead or whatever. Because he could obviously see the flowers that they were growing there that were used to make Substance D.
Right. Well, he takes one and puts it in his boot.
For his friends at Thanksgiving. So to show that that's where they were coming from.
Right. Well, and that's the implication is that that's going to then make its way back into the hands of the police.
And expose New Path for being the place that's growing in.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's some hope, but it's still super depressing.
Yeah, for as bleak as it has like just a glimmer of hope at the end. So
yeah. Oh man, this is probably one of the heavier ones that we've done recently, I'd say. But Philip K. Dick, standard.
That's about my thoughts on this movie. Jesus, Scanner Darkly.
As for Philip K. Dick, not a fan of him.
We'll get back to him later, sharpening a knife.
Oh, you'll get yours, Philip. No, he's dead. I didn't really have anything else other than I think that the performances in this are excellent.
Oh, they're killer.
Like honestly, everyone did a fantastic job, and that's not terribly shocking because Richard Linklater is he's directed a bunch of great movies. I don't know what they are. I will get
Dazed and Confused, Waking Hours, Before Midnight, Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, School of Rock.
So definitely some movies.
Boyhood, all over the place.
Yeah, but he did the remake of The Bad News Bears and Bernie. He's done so much with Jack Black. It's just now occurred to me. I wonder if they had a good relationship or something. But yeah, it's a very well done movie. It just seems it's just kind of a shame because I don't feel like they knew how to market it properly because it's so specific. It's very much got that whole atmosphere of being this is meant for film festivals. This is meant for that kind of crowd.
Being honest, I think that it's really good, but the things that make it good also make it not extremely marketable.
Yeah, it's it leans into all the weird, bizarre aspects of basically following these drug addicts and the undercover cop that's attempting to infiltrate them and figure out what's going on with it. There's just so much of it that works, and if you can get past the kind of weird pacing sometimes, because I think the dialogue is fantastic. It may as well have been written by Shane Black. It's not as funny as Shane Black writes, who's the same guy who did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys, but it's got that kind of similar aspect to it where all of the characters play off of each other so well. Winona Ryder's a little, but that's just kind of how she acts, so I got past it.
I think also, again, this was very hard, and I think for her in particular, she's doing something, because it turns out that she is Hank. We find out at the end, right? Mm-hmm. She's both his supervisor and his drug dealer, and also kind of his girlfriend, and so there's this whole
there's a lot of layers.
Yeah, so I in some ways it's Winona Ryder. In some ways I think that role is really hard to nail down.
Yeah, I'm sure that they were all just kind of trying to be okay. Wait, so what's going on with this now? But It's not the most difficult thing to follow, but it's just some of the ways of how they get from point A to point B can be a little confusing. I would still highly recommend watching this. I thought it was fantastic because I saw this initially back in definitely back in the day, probably sometime in college, I'd guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was like, damn. It just seems like, and it's kind of a shame that there isn't more rotoscoping being done within features and stuff. Because
I kind of wish there were a little more rotoscoping in animation these days.
Yeah, I agree. But who knows? That may change because animation's going under another great renaissance. There's just more animated shows and movies coming out all the time. As long as they keep taking some risks, looking at you, live action Disney movies.
Seriously.
Don't do that.
I'm going to sharpen that knife for you, motherfucker.
Really hoping that trend dies. If you're taking out I'll Make a Man Out of You for Mulan, I will just find you and I will say so many 4-letter words and it will not be pleasant. Anyway, yeah, basically I don't pay money to see those things. They're garbage. But yeah, to us anyway.
I have some issues with the whole thing.
Yeah, no, they're garbage. I'm fine with saying they're garbage. It's fine. I'm fine with saying they're garbage. Fuck it.
Yeah,
who cares? It's Disney. They have more money than God. Whatever.
Come at me.
But Robbie, where can they find you?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at @lobster_writer. You can find me on Instagram at @lobsterwriter, no space. Tracy, where do they find you?
Thank you, Robbie. They can find me on both Twitter and Instagram via @TCTroush. You can also check out our show website, notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. You can also find our episodes up on YouTube. We've got a YouTube page there, so just search for Not Joanna Eggs Podcast. It should show up, no problem. Also, we are doing a contest. I'm not sure if you guys had heard the last one. We'll be promoting this a little bit more.
So we're doing this giveaway right now. Leave a rating on whatever podcasting platform you use.
Yeah, rating and review,
Screenshot
please.
it.
We don't want just stars. We need to have a name to place to contact you.
Right.
So
and then hashtag it Not Joanna Eggs on Twitter or Instagram, and you'll be entered into the drawing. Full details are on both our Instagrams and our Twitters. And in the show notes somewhere. So
yeah, I'll be including some stuff in the show
out.
notes too. Yeah, because honestly, we got some I think we got some pretty cool stuff. There's a set of 3 different Gravity Falls paper crafts. There's one that has let's see, there's the characters, there's the Mystery Shack. The main characters, and also the water tower, which has the big muffin spray painted on it. So there you go. Also, happy just after his birthday, Alex Hirsch, both Alex and Ariel, happy birthday! We know them. There's also the original first edition of the Steven Universe art book. So that's pretty cool too.
Honestly.
Yeah,
I would be after that.
Yeah, seriously, because they, that they started doing reprintings and stuff. There were some controversial things that went on with it. So, but this is the original one. So, and we will be shipping these to you. You have to live in the continental U.S. though, unfortunately, and you have to be over the age of 13. If you're listening to the show, I really hope that you're over the age of 13 because we swear a lot, and I don't want to be held accountable for that with your parent sending me an email reprimanding me for swearing a bunch, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm an adult.
Can I go out on this very quick story then?
Yes, go ahead.
Which is emblematic of how much we swear.
Did you get an email about swearing too much?
No. Here's exactly what happened. I was at our friend's sister's birthday party, and our friend's sister has a 2 to 3 year old daughter.
Yes.
We were talking about something, and I, without thinking, just go, well, shit. And then immediately the little girl says something, and both her parents are reprimanding her, and I was like, what just happened? And I was like, she absolutely just verbatim repeated, well, shit, from me, didn't she?
Oh, boy.
Anywho.
Did they realize that it was you?
I think they did. They just didn't say anything to me.
Because they were too polite to say anything.
Because I'm a 30-year-old person, and God help you if you're trying to scold me for swearing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in this day and age, in this economy.
In this economy? No swearing? What's wrong with you? All right. That's it for me.
That's it for me too. We really appreciate you guys listening. And again, if you have any requests or things you want us to check out, Twitter or Instagram is easily the best way to contact us. I'm on Twitter like a fiend, and I retweet a bunch. So if you are getting bombarded with that, I am sorry.
But I'm still there.
Yeah, true. I have noticed that, but it's cool. But yeah, so thank you so much, and we will talk at you next time.
We love you,
Keanu Reeves. Bye. Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. Our intro music is Don't Hold My Breath by Ben Briggs. The outro is Wet Dreams by Phonetic Hero. Both were found on ocremix.org. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us, or tell a friend to check us out. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Find the show website via notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. Follow us on Twitter via @lobster_writer and @TCTrash. Not Joanna Eggs, because animation is for everybody. Eat my ass, snapping princess.
Same, though.
God damn it.